Today we are going to see a crime thriller sci-fi movie, The Cell, released in year 2000. Warning, spoilers ahead, proceed with caution. A woman dressed in white is riding a horse in the desert, then it turns into a statue when she mounts the horse. Her name is Catharine Deane. She wanders the desert herself until she comes across Edward Baines. Edward is hesitant when Catharine reminds him that he promised to take her sailing today because of the locket's shiny light reflection. Behind Catharine, a shipwreck is seen, but Catharine sneers that it's old and damaged. Then Catharine finds a little boat nearby. However, Edward informs her that Moklok said him the boat is broken, but Catharine reminds him that Moklok is just his hallucinations. Although Moklok is a myth, the boy believes that Moklok is real and he is the villain. She hears squealing behind her as she picks up the boat. She chastises Edward, who has transformed into a monster. Then the boy runs away. Catharine is dissatisfied and presses a microchip on her palm, causing her to awaken in a lab. Her brain activity is monitored by doctors, Henry West and Miriam Kent, in the observation room at the campus center. Miriam is in charge of surveilling the machine and connections that connects Catharine's mind to Edward's mind. Later, Mrs. Baines makes it known that her husband wishes to admit Edward to a hospital. Henry protests that they have been working on the project for years, and as a child psychologist Catharine can say that Edward's condition is not curable by doctors. According to Mr. Baines, who sponsors the research, they haven't made any progress in months, and there is no proof that their exchanges with their kid are having any impact on their child's condition. Meanwhile, Carl Rudolf Stargher enters a building that has been abandoned, and moves toward a glass with a drowned woman at its center. In the other side, Catharine and her team is given an additional 6 months to treat Edward. Catharine, therefore, implores Miriam to switch to reverse the transmission and let Edward access her mind instead. She emphasizes how, given her experience as a social worker, removing the kids from their natural surroundings can help Edward realize that things can be different. Miriam, however, believes that Edward would be startled if he suddenly found himself in a different reality because they can see how it affects Catharine's mind. He is oblivious to what is occurring. That evening, Stargher watches the body of his most recent victim while his dog Valentine sits by the side. He watches the footage of the woman pleading for help as the cell fills with water. Her screams thrill him, and he takes pleasure in his proximity to her dead body. She became the 7th victim of the same killer. The next day, police found the body tossed over the bridge. Agents Ramsey and Novak are shown the body by Detective Cole. Ramsey notes the victim has a metal collar around her neck, which is the perpetrator's manner of designating her as their property. While watching a girl named Julia in the park, Stargher gets a headache and takes some aspirin. Meanwhile, the agent's leader noticed that other than dog hair found on the body, the victim's condition was the same as that of previous victims. Given that all the victims were bleached after passing away, they discovered that the dog hair lacked melanin pigment, which concludes that the dog is a white albino, which is very rare, and the suspect has one. Scene shifts to Julia. Sitting in her car, she hears a puppy yipping from her side mirror. When she gets out to check on the dog, she sees Valentine behind her car and thinks that her car accidentally hit the dog. Suddenly Stargher comes from behind and chocks her until she faints out. Here, Novak and his team has found the truck that fits the tire tracks they found on the bridge. And concluding all the proofs they have, Novak thinks that the murderer wants to get caught by them. The other day Novak is seen in Julia's house, cause Julia's parents have filed a missing report in police about their daughter. When Ramsey learned that a dog breeder had sold an albino puppy 3 years prior, they tracked down the purchaser, who was seen driving a truck that matched the marks they had discovered on the bridge. The agents therefore update their location. Meanwhile, Stargher takes a bath while unaware that the cops are approaching him, but he suddenly has a seizure while his prescription bottle is empty. As he fights to get to his kitchen, a SWAT squad enters Stargher's home and discovers him lying on the floor unconscious. Ramsey reports that Julia isn't at home. They find out Stargher's basement, where he plays creepy games with his victims and kill them after he enjoyed enough. There Ramsey also discovers the prior victim's videotape. Then Stargher was taken to the hospital. Afterwards we see, the doctor tells that Stargher is diseased with schizophrenia caused by a virus, so now he is in coma. Meanwhile, Julia finds herself locked in the glass cell, and there are cameras recording her movements. Only Stargher knows Julia's location, but he has already gone into a coma. The doctor suggests the agent to take Stargher into the campus center and convince Catharine Deane to help them get Julia's location from Stargher's mind. Stargher kept his victims alive for 40 hours before killing them, so the water streaming into the cell is mechanized, as Novak later notes on the recordings. Eventually, Miriam prepares Catharine and Stargher to start the process. The neurological link transfer device costs a lot and maps out the mind before sending it to someone else. Ramsey observes that there are 3 stations and an operating room. Henry recalls how patients' minds were once sent to a psychologist for analysis, but Edward would only speak to Catharine. The machine then starts, and Catharine enters Stargher's mind. She first sees a group of people laughing while drowning a lad in lake, before ending up in a tunnel. There she notices a boy racing up some stairs, and she follows him. The lad is seen padding on a horse. When Catharine arrives, he avoids her. Catharine tries to calm him by telling him about Edward while patting the horse. The younger Stargher looks at the clocks around in fear and pushes Catharine back, as a big slicer shows up and slices the horse into pieces. The young Stargher then runs away. Catharine searches for him and starts wandering, but pauses when she discovers glass cells with women's inside. She then notices gears on one of the cells, which appear to activate a device that opens the cells and moves the victims like puppets. As Catharine leaves, a door opens, and a gigantic woman comes out. She grabs Catharine and knocks her down, and takes her to a throne room. Afterwards, we see Stargher approaches her while yanking a velvet fabric strap to his back. Catharine screams in terror and pushes the microchip on her palm to wake herself up. As she wakes up, Miriam checks on her and calms her down. Henry informs Catharine that her excursion inside Stargher's head is becoming risky. He warns that if Catharine begins to believe that Stargher's reality is genuine, this could impact her physically as well as psychologically. Meanwhile, water begins to seep inside the glass cell where Julia is kept, but it soon stops. The poor woman sobs helplessly and begins to spray. Later, while Catharine is sitting next to Edward, Novak comes up to her and asks if she believes she can save him. Consequently, Catharine emphasizes that everyone possesses a part of themselves that they don't want to display to others. And when she enters a patient's mind, she has seen those hidden sides of the patient and senses their secrets. But in Stargher's mind, she experiences something she had never wanted to feel in public. After having a little chit-chat with Novak, Catharine decides to enter Stargher's mind again, but suggests having Valentine in the room to piece Stargher subconsciously, and it could make him more accessible. As she is about to begin, the power goes out. Henry asks Catharine to check the circuit breaker. She walks to it but notices that the room has suddenly shrunk. When C looks back, she sees that her body is still attached to the device. Suddenly, Catharine finds herself in a glass cage. C flies down and sees Valentine is approaching towards her. Behind the dog, she notices the young Stargher walking toward a house. She asks Valentine to take her to Stargher. There, Catharine finds the boy washing the dishes. Catharine gives him a locket, and says him to shine the locket whenever he needs her. While taking the locket, the boy breaks a plate accidentally. As Stargher's father enters the room through the door, he quickly conceals Catharine in a closet. Catharine sees his father is abusing him rudely for breaking the plate. Catharine wants to help the boy, but the door is not opening. Catharine got emotional when she sees how Stargher is tortured by his father in his childhood. When Catharine turns her head back to the closet, the interior scene switches to the room and she sees the adult Stargher dissecting his victim's body for organs. She approaches him cautiously, and Stargher queries her presence. Catharine informs him that she wants to assist him. But according to Stargher, his father kept him underwater as his son was baptized because he was having a seizure and thought he was drowning. But Catharine lamentably claims that Stargher's father was evil, and Stargher replies his father was more powerful than him. Afterwards, Catharine asks him about Julia's location. Eventually, Stargher disappears and knocks Catharine down to the ground from coming behind. Stargher then binds a spiky belt around her neck. Miriam and Henry attempted to break the connection at the center after spotting something harmful on Catharine's neural activity. According to Miriam, Catharine thinks the world of Stargher is real, which can cause her coma or death. On the other side, Julia's cell is still being filled with water, but it suddenly stops, and she starts banging on the cell door, pleading for help after noticing the pipes on the center ceiling. Novak decides to go through the process to help Catharine get normal. As he is being prepared for the process, Miriam reminds Novak to say anything private about Catharine to her, based on Catharine's file he saw, which may be sufficient to bring her back to his senses. After entering into Stargher's mind, Novak awakens in a field with 3 women staring up at him with their mouths open. Suddenly, the women asks him about their son, who is an abomination and was stolen from their father. A light flashes, and when he turns around he finds himself in a strange place. The young Stargher, flashing the light from Catharine's locket, emerges behind him. As Novak finds Catharine sitting on a bed, the boy goes away. Novak approaches Catharine and took off the mask from her face. Then Catharine starts seducing Novak. Suddenly Stargher comes from behind and puts a red bag over his head. In the next scene, Novak wakes up and finds himself tied up on a spiky platform. Stargher starts torturing him by cutting his stomach and then binding his internal pipes to a spiky rod, which causes him severe pain. The man starts to scream, hoping to awaken Catharine from her trance, and reminds Catharine of her younger brother who passed away after spending 6 months in a coma. Soon, Catharine's expressionless face disappears. Then, she stealthily approaches Stargher carrying a knife and stabs him. Then their surroundings changes. Novak wakes up with Catharine in an unknown location. The young Stargher is standing close to an elaborate glass display where a woman is dancing. Catharine assumes it stands for the location where Stargher imprisons his victims. She goes near to the boy and inquiries about Julia's location. Eventually, the man remembers that the corners of the wall resemble something he saw in Stargher's cells. Novak suggests a plan and draws Catharine away, telling her he knows where Julia is. Therefore, they must immediately depart. Catharine wants to save the young Stargher, but as Novak pulls her away, the child backs off, and an adult Stargher appears and takes him away. Finally, just as more water is pouring into Julia's cell, Novak and Catharine awaken at the center. Afterwards, Novak quickly calls Agent Cole and asks him to check Stargher's cell, and he found the same logo Novak has saw. It is known that the logo belongs to Carvin Industries. Novak tells his team to find out more about the Carvin industry, to know where they planted their machines which can lead them to Julia's cell. Catharine wakes up and, she decides to help the young Stargher. But Henry opposes her, cause it's dangerous for her health. In the other side, while everyone is doubting Novak's idea, Novak doesn't care and took the helicopter, and heads towards the location. Here, Julia's cell is filling up gradually off. The scene shifts to the lab, where Catharine is preparing to reverse the process, then Ramsey and Miriam comes and opposes her. Catharine locks them out of the room and starts the reverse process, bringing Stargher into her brain and linking them to the machine. Next, we see the young Stargher is now in her mind. The young Stargher requests her to stay in that place with him, but Catharine explains that this can't be possible. Catharine cannot help him in the same way, so she tells the youngster it is no longer important upon his return. Suddenly, the scene gets darkened. Catharine detects bugs crawling around the boy. And then the demonic Stargher emerges from the water in front of them. In the other side, while waiting for the FBI agent Cole's report, it is known that the state is trying to find the original owner of the machine whose property it has been taken back. The government then recruited Stargher to seal the aircraft, giving him access to all the tools they were using to find its whereabouts. After listening that, Novak heads towards that location. Meanwhile, Catharine faces the monstrous Stargher with a crossbow. She wounds his feet with his bow and then beats him hard. After that she takes out her sword and stabs him in chest, but this also affects the young Stargher, and he also gets wounds just like the monster Stargher. Meanwhile, Novak goes to the abandoned property, and began searching for Julia. Eventually, Novak discovers that a machine's pipe has abruptly opened. Noticing this, he follows the machine's lines, which lead him to an underground room. There, he finds Julia who is struggling to live and is breathing through a broken pipe. Novak shoots the glass and breaks it with a pipe and successfully saves Julia, without causing any harm to her. As the young Stargher begs Catharine to save him, she transforms into a mother figure and cradles him. When the boy starts to limp, Catharine lowers him into the water. And at last Stargher dies. Soon, everything gets normal. Novak asks Catharine if she is certain about her plan to allow Edward access her mind, and she responds with yes. Novak clarifies that he isn't concerned about the boy as Catharine checks on him. Novak acknowledges that her thoughts are still jumbled. Then in the end we see, Catharine adds trees to Edward's mental desert, and the movie ends, as Edward approaches to Catharine. Make sure to subscribe our channel for more content like this, and don't forget to hit the bell icon to stay notified about our new videos. Thanks for watching.